You're listening to the Place Northwest COP26 podcast series,
a dedicated series that explores all things net zero carbon and sustainability within the built environment.
Alongside some of the biggest names in property, we'll be delving into topics such as
why the market is pushing net zero carbon faster than legislation.
Is renovation and retrofitting better for the planet than new construction?
How can we balance sustainability concerns with profit margins?
And much, much more.
Don't miss any future episodes. Subscribe at placenorthwest.co.uk/subscribe or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Place Northwest's COP26 podcast series. I'm your host, Dan Whelan. This episode is sponsored by GLD Technical Consulting. GLD is a growing SME that creates mechanical and electrical engineering designs that make life that little bit easier and more efficient. The company helps to deliver spaces that people want to spend time in, whether for work, learning, leisure, or well-being purposes. To find out more, email info@gldtechnicalconsulting.co.uk. Today we are asking how the government and the development community will go about building homes for the future and what will happen to the hundreds of thousands of existing homes that need to be brought in line with future home standards. What will the drive to net zero mean for private owners? How will it impact the margins of landlords and housing associations? And is the government taking the issue seriously enough? Joining me today to discuss this topic are Laura Dunlop, founder of GLD Technical Consulting, and Sandy Livingstone, Executive Director of Property at Onward Homes. Thank you very much for joining us. So the question here is, well, there's a lot to unpick actually. So Laura, we'll start with you. Tell me what GLD does and how it feeds into the future home standards discussion.
Well, GLD are an SME working in the built environment, and we provide designs and advice to clients on their building services or their mechanical and electrical systems for their buildings. We work in many sectors, such as healthcare, industrial, commercial and education, but we've been very fortunate in recent years to be able to work on a number of social housing developments, mainly in the new build sector. Residential refurbishment has generally been for private clients or developers converting existing properties from offices. And they tend to be for private sale rather than social housing. We're seeing reasonable take-ups in renewable technologies such as air source heat pumps in the private sector, but we're not seeing as much take-up in the social housing sector. And we know that there's concerns in the social housing sector that relate to capital outlay for sustainable equipment, for air source heat pumps and mechanical ventilation heat recovery. Other issues such as planning regarding site and equipment, and concerns regarding knowledge of user interfaces and the tenants of how they will accept new technologies. And the discussions we've had so far with social housing providers indicate that they are looking to work towards the net zero carbon commitments. And for new builds, there seems to be some kind of roadmap that they can understand with regards to the future home standard. But tackling existing building stock seems to be where there's a sticking point, both financially and determining strategy of what they actually need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well explained. Thank you for that. So yes, the Future Home Standards comes into force in 2025, as I understand it. So there's kind of a lead up period now of 4 years where housing associations have to think about their strategy. So Sandy, what is Onward Homes' strategy firstly in after 2025 in terms of new builds? Are you going to be using some of the technologies that Laura just spoke about there?
I think in terms of new builds, I think it's a clearer path for us. I think our view is the 2025 targets the governments are actually setting they aren't ambitious enough. I think you can see a way of building through panelised wall systems, fabric first, linked to forms of technology that you can actually either achieve zero carbon or you can get to negative zero carbon. I think that technology is possible for us with using systems like heat recovery systems in terms of that, and using things like air source heat pumps, solar photovoltaics and battery backup. I think that all and Wonderwall systems are actually technology that learns how a customer lives in the environment. Technology's been trialled now, but if you look that kind of time period ahead, I think we would be looking for that to be standardised in our new builds. And certainly from onwards, we've just been awarded a grant to deliver over 3,000 homes. We're now a strategic partner of Homes England. So for us, probably we are building properties rated at EPC B now for new build. But I would be looking for us probably the next batch that comes through the next 2 to 3 years to be looking towards a zero carbon house. And actually starting to commit to do that. Because I think if housing associations start to commit collaboratively across the north, what you'll find is it will create the market and it will create the industrial base. It starts to change the price base. At the moment, we can't afford to do that because it's over £20,000 extra per property. But if it starts to get closer into maybe half that value, then it is possible for us. It starts to become something we can do. I think the most important thing, and I think you picked up on it as well, is that it's got to be usable for the customer. So the customer has to be able to use it. The way I've heard it described is Fisher Price, which is the old toys which had on and off. And I think when it becomes intuitive like that for our customers, then they will actually start to get a benefit in terms of savings on how efficient the property is, then that'll start to address the issues we've got. But we're definitely up for pushing towards it.
Excellent. And in terms of galvanising the sector and getting that wide buy-in from other housing associations, how do you go about doing that? Is there something already in place to begin that process?
For us, we are working at city region level, so both at Liverpool city region level and Greater Manchester level with both those city regional authorities. So there is collaborative effort going on in both city regions across the housing association network to try and get an agreed approach to new build properties, but also probably more importantly to scale up retrofit. So an agreed approach on the basis of collaboratively we will be able to offer hundreds of thousands of houses into the market with an agreed approach that we bring that then starts to reset the supply chain. Now, what we need is government to match our ambition. If you look at the scale in Greater Manchester, it's £4.5 billion to retrofit social housing stock in Greater Manchester alone. So we need to see sustained funding to match what we intend to bring to the market that allows us to start committing. I think that would be my view and the basis of my responsibility in Onward is for sustainability.
Have you seen, Sandy, the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund that's just live at the moment? Is that something that you're looking at as part of your association?
We're bidding. We have a scheme in Runcorn we're bidding for through Liverpool City Region. We're also bidding for a scheme in Oldham, and we are looking at bidding with other housing associations in both city regions. And I think the challenge with that is it's the usual challenge we have with government funding. It's £180 million, has to be done by 2022. The bid criteria is just opening. If you look at the level of need, then for us it's about taking every opportunity that comes, but making sure that we are collaborative and collectively ready for the next wave when it comes, so that we have schemes ready to bid for. So yes, we are doing it. It's a start and it's welcomed, but it's a start.
Yeah, because it takes so long to get these developments actually into planning and through planning to actually have them ready for when the funding's actually triggered. I know it's quite a task.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. And the other thing, it's about understanding what's technically possible. So one of the problems in the past with this sort of retrofit programme hasn't been done properly. So we've overclad the properties but not ventilated them. And we haven't fitted the right heating solution. So the whole combination of the sort of stuff that your firm company does, getting that combination right, because the one thing we're also very conscious is if we do this, we get one chance at doing this. We have to get it right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So do you have a mix of existing properties that all have different needs as regards refurbishment?
We range from Georgian properties that were built in 1850. We've got about 4,000 properties that were built before the First World War as a housing association. So we have that all the way through some of the non-traditional housing that was built in the 60s and 70s, all the way to tower blocks. So we've got quite a broad mix that we're trying to address and make sure that we bring the right solution to.
Yeah, you haven't got one solution that fits all. You've got a number of solutions that need to be developed depending on what the current EPC ratings are, what the needs are of
Yeah,
that specific property.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's fascinating and an unenviable task really for you, Sandy. Have you put a value on the cost of retrofitting your properties? Because you manage, I think it's 35,000 homes across the Northwest. What's the pound sign there in terms of the cost of retrofitting those properties?
So retrofitting up to EPC band C is £110 million. Retrofitting and achieving zero carbon across the whole of the portfolio, it's a very loose estimate, because I think, as Laura will tell you, when you get into the technical nature of the solution, we think it's around 350 to 400 million pounds for our property stock to try and achieve zero carbon. But that's clearly subject to other things changing, like we would need the grid to be decarbonised. We'd need a whole lot of other things to do to help to make that happen for us. So I think in that region.
Yeah, there's a massive sum of money. And in terms of a split between capital outlay and government help, what would you hope to see there?
Ideally, I think, I think we would like to see a committed. For us, if the government is consistent about what level of grant it's going to offer over a sustained period, we can start to make our choices. I mean, ideally, we don't expect the government to pay all of it. Ideally, somewhere around half would be ideal. But even if what they do is commit 10-20%, but what they also do is guarantee a rent settlement, because housing associations, every year the government sets rent with us. It's currently CPI plus 1%. If the government could guarantee us that rent settlement so that we're secure in terms of what income we expect, plus be confident about sustained funding, then I think we can start to financially plan around it. Without that, it's very difficult to actually see. I mean, we'll do what we can. We will absolutely commit to maximising what our business can to achieve this target. You can rest assured in that. But we won't achieve everything we want without government support.
Yeah, absolutely. And Laura, from your perspective, what are the silver bullets, as it were, in terms of the technology that landlords and housing associations should be adopting to get their homes to net zero?
So to keep systems energy efficient, initially you don't really want to have to heat a home. If you could find a home that you didn't have to heat, you wouldn't expend any energy. So I think, in line with the Future Home Standard, trying to upgrade the thermal elements so that your buildings themselves are inherently energy efficient, so you don't have to spend as much heating them. That people have an understanding about water usage, so that you're not having to heat up as much hot water. Those are the biggest energy users in homes. It's all about the heating and the hot water. So as long as upgrades for existing properties include the improvements to the material specifications of the walls and the windows and the roof, that will inherently keep mechanical and electrical systems to their optimum level. And then we look at the more energy efficient technologies, such as the air source heat pumps. They do come out pretty well on energy efficiency. And looking at the heat recovery ventilation systems, where you use warmed air that you're extracting out of a building to help to warm the cold air that's coming in, which improves energy efficiency and helps with air infiltration, which is obviously air filtration, which is obviously a big thing at the moment with the pandemic. People are a lot more concerned about having good air quality within homes.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sandy mentioned before that the approximate cost of implementing technologies such as these to each home is 20,000. And you mentioned before, Laura, that you're seeing sort of reticence, maybe the wrong word, but from housing associations and landlords to spend this money.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the reticent isn't necessarily with the housing associations themselves, but I think there's a whole contractual arrangement that helps to build the new build multi-apartment developments, and developers are going in with a pricing structure to housing associations to build some of these properties, and to be able to fit everything into their overall budget. There's some things that tend on the construction side tend to get more squeeze than others, and we're seeing that the heat recovery ventilation is one of those, and air source heat pumps is the other one that tends to be squeezed more when they're looking at overall development finance.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, the issue of sustainability and climate change and net zero carbon is, we talk about it every single day. It's in the news every single day. It seems strange, therefore, that these developers are still skimping on these elements of a project. Sandy, I assume that you're not in that particular boat.
I think there's a bit of. I think part of it's the leaked new technology in terms of, I think as the technology becomes more used and there's more of a guarantee about it working, I think what a lot of housing associations are reticent, because some of this technology has been tried but not necessarily been successful. Predecessors have been tried, so there is a bit about confidence in the technology and making sure it works. There is also a thing is that probably the view been taken until on the basis how we have funded it, is that if we get the fabric right and design it properly, our view at the moment is we do that, we can then retrofit. So changing the heating system out is probably less of a problem for us, as long as the fabric has been designed properly in the first place. So there'll always be that tension between what the funding and what the technology you want to fit. I think as we have more confidence in the technology, I think we will start shifting the type of heating systems that we fit. And I think the ventilation system, Laura makes a really good point. I think one of the things that you can forget, and sometimes as you improve the thermal efficiency of a property, unless it's well ventilated, and you've got these heat recovery units, and it's a bit of a false economy, because what will actually happen is we'll spend a lot of time dealing with condensation problems in the properties and mold growth. So there's a wee bit of, sometimes for us, we will look at it on a basis of a spend to save approach. So if we do this and spend a bit more capital, does it actually start to reduce our maintenance debt longer term? I think that's probably one of the reasons we will address this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to talk about privately owned homes for a moment, because I did some research. 63% of households own their own home. That's the majority. There's no sort of pressure on private homeowners to retrofit their properties at this stage. I'm a homeowner, and I'm not thinking about getting rid of my gas boiler. In fact, I got a gas boiler fitted less than a year ago, and that's probably got a 10, 15-year lifespan. The Green Homes grant, 1.5 billion to give homeowners money to retrofit their properties and upgrade them, was a failure. The government abandoned it, and there wasn't very good take up. So, Laura, just on that for a moment, private households, how much of a problem is that in terms of the wider emissions issue?
I think it's coming up to personal choice at the moment. Currently, it's personal choice. I think people who are interested in getting onto the sustainability agenda are starting to look at improving their homes. I think moving forward, that some people will be forced into look at improving their homes because fuel costs are going to start to increase. And there will definitely be a move of people having to start thinking about better insulating their homes, or having better glazing quality, etc., just to get those fuel prices down. And I think there is going to be a middle ground of people who just can't afford to do it and don't actually hit the low income band, where the majority of the grants for private homeowners are geared towards low income families, and there is going to be a band of people who just won't be able to afford to do that, who may end up dropping into fuel poverty. I think that's one of the possibilities.
Right. Sandy, what would you like to add to
I
that?
think Laura's probably covered it pretty well in terms of, I think that there will be different segments in the private housing market that will see this as something that they should do and have an obligation to do. And we'll see that, in effect, you're right. If you insulate your home better and change the type of heating system, what you're actually doing is reducing your longer term running costs. And I think there's an argument for that for those who can afford to do it, to actually start making that switch, hopefully encouraged by the energy companies in terms of the way they design the tariffs. But you're right, that there is a band of lower income that necessarily the only way they'll be able to deliver this is if somebody supports them with an effective grant system longer term. Otherwise, why would you? If you're still allowed to run a gas boiler, why would you change? The only time you would change is when that 15 years from now, or 10 to 15 years, when it's due for renewal. Um, I think that's where the biggest challenge is for housing associations. Yes, it will take a while to build the momentum, but I think there is a path for private house owners until the market starts seeing a value in actually retrofitting and improving energy efficiency. And that means that when you sell your house as a greater value and people want it more, that's the dynamic shift that you need to have. That plus, I think, support for low income families, as Laura says.
Yeah, so just going back to the Green Homes grant, so there were grants of up to £10,000 available. Like I said, there wasn't very good take up. Laura, why do you think that take up wasn't there? This is free money to upgrade your house, potentially adding
Yeah,
value to your house.
the grant up to £10,000 was for again, it was geared towards low income families, and I'm fortunate not to be in that sector, but I don't know how the Green Grant was actually advertised to those families. Um, it is a lot of money, and as a lot of properties, it possibly could take more than £10,000 to upgrade your home. If you think about upgrading a 3 bedroom, 2 bedroomed house and replacing all the windows and doors to something that's more thermally efficient, that could quite easily cost you £10,000. And then you haven't got your roof insulated, you haven't got any additional insulation on your walls, you haven't got your air tightness looked at. There's a lot of things in buildings that cost quite a hefty sum, and the government needs to start thinking about how they provide these grants and supporting people in making the right choices of what that money is actually spent on. Make it clearer to people what the grant is for and how it can improve their actual homes. I just don't think that people are being educated well enough into what it all means and how it can help them moving forward.
I agree. I think it wasn't well publicised. I think the whole education piece of carbon literacy and making it clear why this is important. I don't think enough of that was done. Yes, there was an attractive offer, but I think it's the reason to do it wasn't clear for people and I think when you start to see, well, over recent days, energy prices spiking, it becomes more obvious why there's a link between the two. So I think that's where it was challenged, and it probably wasn't particularly well managed or run either.
Yeah, I think making that incentive clear is very important, isn't it? Because I think we as humans, I think we concentrate on the short term, don't we? And we don't necessarily look too far ahead. And this is something it's very much a long term thing. That's when you're going to see the benefit. Your house is worth more. The benefits to your cheaper bills. That it's not immediate changes, and I think that's what needs to be communicated more. Is that you will see the impact, but it's a waiting game. Let's imagine then that everybody, housing associations, private landlords, private homeowners, mobilise and decide to get on with this work and try and make their homes net zero carbon. We run into another problem, don't we? And that's of lack of a workforce.
Yes, there is definitely a need for more training in the construction sector for renewable and sustainable technologies. We're finding some private clients who are looking to have air source heat pump systems installed, that the local contractors are too busy or just don't have the staff available to undertake the installations. So there's definitely a need for further support in the sector for installations of those technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. Sandy, how are Onward going to go about tackling that issue if it does arise?
I think it's already here. I think we are already starting to train our technical staff on this. I think one of the things, as a big procurer of business services across the north, is actually using our buying power to start driving training programs, either by ourselves or collaboratively. It's a phrase we use in Onward, is the northern pound that we spend. So how do we spend it to drive training, to drive our contracting base and supply chains to deliver what we might need in the future? So I think that would be our focus, and I think that will start to address it, because at the moment I think one of the other challenges you've got, as Laura says, is we don't actually have the supply chains and contracting base to deliver this when we organise ourselves to go and do it, because it's not there yet, and we have to create it as well as actually making sure we understand how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's to summarise. We need the government to put its hand in its pocket. Basically, we need the government to also have a clearer message to private homeowners about why this is important, and we also need the workforce in order to carry out these changes as well. Laura, what's your prediction for the future? Future home standards comes into force in 2025. How long is it going to take to see those things? The workforce, the government money. What's your prediction?
Well, in construction, as most people will know, it takes a long time for projects to get off the ground and actually moving. It can take years for developments to come to fruition, and I think it's going to be the same with this move to net zero carbon. It is going to take years. Whether we'll be able to hit the targets that the government is setting, I think it's going to be a big task, and it needs people like Sandy at Onward Homes who are fully prepared to get behind it and drive it to start to help move these things forward. There's also some other issues around the zero carbon as regards universal measurement and assessment of facilities and buildings as to where they are now as regards where they are on that roadmap, and planning for future. There does seem to be a little bit of a disconnect as to how everybody's going to measure that. And also the reliance on energy prediction using the SAP methodology is a little bit difficult, because it doesn't actually give you the best assessment of predictive energy. It's a benchmark, and there is more work needed on actually looking at existing buildings and measuring energy and energy usage so that can be added into future projects. Okay. And we can learn from what we're actually doing at the moment.
Right. And Sandy, from your perspective, how confident are you that the sector will be able to overcome the issues that we've raised today?
I think if we can get our politicians in the place where they have a strategy to back up their targets, if we can see some form of confidence in terms of and a commitment from the politicians, that will allow us to drive what we want to do through. I don't think there's any lack of desire in the social housing sector to do this. I think there's a very clear social commitment and a need to do it, so that for both our customers and for the future of the country and the planet. So I'm always an optimism, and my worry is that what we've got is short-termism in terms of decision making, and that we might not see this side of the next general election, and that might be a real problem on the basis of it might we are starting to run out of time to do this. So in the meantime, we will keep our shoulder to the wheel and do what we can. But I think that I am nervous about the level of commitment we will see.
Absolutely, yes. Well, watch this space. New housing minister, or levelling up minister now, as he's called, Michael Gove. Pressure on him to sort of deliver on this element as well. Laura, Sandy, thank you so much for your time and for an excellent debate on the future of our homes.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.